Hi, Lindsay. I'm so excited to have you here today and to talk about neuroscience and your work. So, welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, Patty. Thank you for having me.
I'd like to hear a little bit more, and for anyone who's listening to us, hear a little bit more about the work that you do and what inspired you to start working in neuroscience.
Yeah. Well, I am a researcher at heart, and it was through my research actually that I developed what I'm understanding to be a brain retraining program that targets the stress response for high achievers specifically. So I'll stop there and see where we go.
Well, as you know, and you and I have had some really wonderful conversations that I really love the practical side of neuroscience in learning how to apply it into our lives. And I know that you work with leaders, and I would love to hear, some success stories. How does this really change the way our leaders show up?
Yeah. So I work with a lot of mostly CEOs, a lot of growth stage startup founders, investors. I've worked with professional athletes, professional artists. I work with people who are either wanting to heal and recover from severe burnout, prevent burnout, or just optimize their leadership generally. And the way that it translates into their behavior and into their company and the way that they leave is really, there's a wide variety. But essentially, this is, like I said, it's a brain retraining program that targets the stress response for people who are high achievers, the people who are addicted to productivity, that runs off of cortisol and adrenaline, right? So it's the go, go, go mentality of nothing's going to get in my way, and that mentality has incredible superpowers to it, but it's a slippery slope, risk for burnout and for short-term impulsive decision making, missing opportunity for creativity, missing opportunity for connection to culture development within your team. So when you step out of that addiction to cortisol and adrenaline, right, when you rewire your limbic system, your stress response, but you can maintain the same level of productivity, but do it from a place of ease,
Mhm.
everything changes. Literally everything changes. You're able to connect to the people around you. You're able to be a lot more self-aware. Really, that's where it starts. It's you're actually present, right? When you think about the nervous system, when it's running on cortisol and adrenaline, or when it's just in that hyperproductivity mode and doesn't know how to stop because it's so habitual, right? It's um it's just in that mode. And what is the nervous system doing when it's not in that mode? It's just allowing and accepting everything that's occurring just as it is, right? And we all know that the teams that are successful, the big companies and small companies that are successful, are the ones that see reality as it is. They're not seeing the reality that they're hoping for, or they're not living in the reality that they're afraid of. They're seeing reality as it is. And so when you're able to do that in an embodied way and in an authentic way as a leader, not resisting in fear and not being too overly optimistic and missing the mark in other areas, you're able to move your team forward, you're able to move yourself forward, you're able to move your product forward and your marketing or whatever it is forward more and more and more effectively.
So it sounds like you really help leaders get unstuck.
Yes. Or prevent being stuck, right?
What
Well,
brings the flow. And I think
yeah.
that was where you and I have really connected on this topic of helping people. I say it a little bit different. I like to help people show up their best self so that they can be in flow. And as leaders, how can we do that if we're addicted to that productivity? We're addicted to even power. And I think more and more I see the fear that arises in uncertain times like we're in right now. And that fear creates a desire for more and more power and control. Because if a leader hasn't done their internal work, they're fighting for control in the
Yes.
external world. How would you start a conversation with someone who is clearly gripping for control and losing sight of their inner presence?
Well, whenever the ego grips for control, right, we're in an unconscious survival mode, right? So there's some sort of limiting belief or fear. There's a fear. There's always a limiting belief, and then there's the fear associated with what that limiting belief is, and the unconscious mind that puts the whole system, body and mind, into survival mode, right? And that's the being stuck in cortisol and adrenaline, right? And then it presents itself as what you were saying greed, right? Or no, you were saying control, being in
Power,
control.
control, greed,
Yeah,
they're very similar, right?
yeah. So being in that grip of control, right? But when you're out in a parasympathetic response, when you're more open to just whatever's actually happening that's out of your control and allowing and accepting that while also making appropriate decisions, then that grip starts to loosen, right? So I think your question was, how do I open that conversation? So I would ask, what's the worst thing that could happen here?
Mm.
Like I have a 8-year-old son, and I tell him all the time, face your fears and it'll disappear. And that's it's so true, right? So I would open the question that like the a whole session essentially on, facing the fear. Like if this worst case scenario were to happen, what does that mean about you? And if that were to happen, and if that were true, just in a hypothetical virtual reality, then what? And then what? And then what? And then what? Right? And then it's always, oh, it's not that bad, actually. And then their point of view, the fixed point of view of like, I have to be in control. Like, if I don't get this outcome, like almost like I'm going to die, you know, starts to open up. The fixed point of view starts to become more fluid, and they start to see the situation from different angles. And suddenly they have more choice. They have greater options for what choice to make to be even more strategic,
Oh, and
effectively.
that's powerful, right? And it's good for the teams, it's good for the individual. I can imagine it's good for their families when they're able to have more awareness. I often, talk about it as acing life. A for awareness, C for choice, and then E for the evolution that happens when we pause long enough to to make that choice.
Oh, I
And
love that.
yeah, it's simple and it can be rather life-changing in the moment, and then someone will get hijacked again. And so I don't know if you've seen this, but I often have people when I talk about the neuroscience and being above the line or below the line, that I've had people say, wow, you just blew my mind. Like, this is really amazing stuff. And then slip right back into the old thought patterns and
Yeah,
justifying them. And I think it took me probably a good year after I started learning and practicing the neuroscience and the practical ways to stay above the line before I stopped justifying my below the line behavior and thoughts.
yeah.
And I know you talked a little bit about above and below the line too. How does that integrate with what you're teaching your leaders?
Yeah, I talk about it a lot. It's really, I mean, I talk about it in different ways though too. It's really at the center of nervous system regulation, stress regulation, right? Is to be able, I call it self-location, right? To be able to become aware enough to locate the self. And in this framework, it's like, are you above the line or below the line? And if you're below the line, where? what dynamic are you in the drama triangle? Are you enrolling yourself as the villain, the victim, or the hero? Or if you're above the line, where above the line are you in that virtuous cycle, right? And so it's like being above the line is in a parasympathetic, and being below the line is in a stress response. And it's really central. And then there's different ways to make that shift, right? And I love the conscious leadership commitments. It's like, that's like one, self-location. Two, how do you, if you are able to locate yourself below the line, if you're able to locate yourself in a trigger, in a contraction, in, you know, a clouded mind of reactivity, and then how can you regulate yourself in the moment in real time without negating or repressing what's actually real for you, like the real emotion, and then making that shift when it's appropriate, like by being curious or a whole variety of tools to get above the line again, to get in that sense of like ease and acceptance, back in flow, essentially.
Well, I think, we both, I'll speak for myself. I am loving our conversations because even though we use different terminology, we're going at the same thing. We're understanding the same principles in different ways. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about your research and share with anyone who might be listening the things that you've come to understand that allow you and your clients to flow.
Yeah, thank you. Um, well, this all really started in a lab that I was working out of in Palo Alto called the Transformative Technology Lab when I was a PhD intern. I was working with Jeffrey Martin on a huge data set from a program called the Finder's Course that's no longer available. And it's a course, an online course that combines positive, very well researched, a whole variety of positive psychology exercises, which is essentially self-directed applied neuroplasticity, right? Changing the script, rewriting the script of that narrative mind, right? And then in the Finder's Course, there was also all the different primary lineage traditions of different types of meditations, the lineage traditions, the techniques that have been well studied in the West, essentially. And so it combined meditation with positive psychology. It was 17 weeks long. And I was in that lab for over 3 years, putting people through this program, coaching them through this program, and then analyzing all of the data that we collected in the program. And to essentially transition, the whole point of the program was to transition people into what Jeffrey was calling persistent non-symbolic experience, which is when that narrative mind gets really, really quiet. Not into non-conceptual stillness, right? There's a lot of misinterpretation in the West that meditation, the point of meditation is to turn off thoughts. It's not actually possible, it turns out, but to get to actually quiet that narrative mind or put it in more into the background where that sense of presence, that sense of flow and ease is actually in the forefront, right? And all of those random thoughts, the story making machine of the narrative mind is in the background, right? And so my coaching work, my brain retraining program is standing on top of this Finder's Course program and everything that I learned in it. And I basically just took that as a framework and developed it for further by including limiting belief work, these techniques that get into the unconscious mind that hook us into that survival programming of cortisol and adrenaline, and a different type of meditation too. I've just kind of advanced it further and designed it in a way that's specifically for these high achievers. And I did that because I am one. And I found that I really enjoyed working with people that I can relate to. And these are all the techniques that worked the best for me. So it's really fun because it just works, and I saw that data and I saw what worked best. I saw the experience that people had with certain techniques and how they really opened at certain stages of the program. And it's just been really fun to take it further.
Oh, I just love it. And I love that your very technical side of things, for those who know me, I simplify things down to like the very, very basic and to be working with you. And I'm looking forward to 2026 and doing some fun projects with you to bring that balance together. I tend to, take people out in the forest and let them experience that presence there and to walk them through just very simple, practical tools with neuroscience. And you bring that rich, deep science to it that is just such a beautiful compliment. And I love our conversations and our interchange of different words getting us to the same beautiful place where we can show up our best.
Yes, I agree. I'm so excited and delighted to have met you and look forward to a lot more.
Yes, and I know we're doing some work this next year with Brian from the Silicon Valley Entrepreneurs Network, and so I'm very excited about that as well.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, let's keep the conversations going. I would love to, over time, have some conversations about what practical neuroscience really looks like. How do we each support others in their journey? And I think that our conversations, there will be pieces that resonate with some people and not with others, and vice versa. And if we can be one of those catalysts to help bring more flow to the lives of others and help them find their way. I just love that idea.
Me too. Thank you, Patty.
Thank you. And let's have a conversation again soon. Thank you
Okay.
so much.